Where were you on April 20th, 2020 when WTI went negative?
I was taking pictures of my television screen.
Me too. I was in my bedroom. I was in my bedroom just watching that ticker,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
flabbergasted.
yeah. I just was laughing. I'm like, this is just ridiculous.
My name's Peter Brecht. I'm here with Wade Spear, and our guest today is Dan Doyle. He's got a book coming out in a couple months of Roughnecks and Riches. Dan, thank you so much for being with us. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Peter and Wade. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been following you on Twitter for a while. You posted up that you're, got to get this book out there and spread the word. But honestly, some of the stuff you've been posting, just not even about the book, has been so interesting. I had the opportunity to FaceTime you a couple weeks ago, and you were showing me, you're right there on a frac site. You're doing some work.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of work. What are you working on these days? Like, what brings up to speed?
Well, like any oil and gas guy, not a whole lot right now with oil nosediving.
55.
Yeah, pretty tough. And so, truthfully, what we'll do is I've got a frac job in Wyoming, and we're fracking right now back east. But the way we do it is there's on a frac company that's back east in the Appalachian and Illinois Basin. But we also frac our own wells for drilling out in the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. So I've got a well to frac out there. We drilled a pad at so we're going to keep working on that. And I got to tell you, though, it looks like work's about to fall off the cliff. So I would say with these oil prices, as soon as it hit 55, that's just when that's the surrender point. And I've been kind of wondering if it was going to be 60 or 55 or where. But I've got friends at bigger companies laying down rigs right now. I'm hearing about Permian rig laydowns going on. So it's going to be a little tough. 26 could be a tough year. So
yeah, nobody's talking about picking up activity in first quarter, right? That's normally what you hear about this time of year. Everybody starts getting optimistic, but
getting their program started for the year,
right.
For sure, and now it's going to be tough. We've got a lot of supply and our demand's good, but there's just too much supply. But I do feel that's going to work. We're going to work our way through it. Oil demand, OPEC says it's going to 123. We're at about 105 right now, but we're overproducing. And a lot of that's a result of OPEC unwinding the voluntary cuts after the pandemic. So most of those have been unwound and coming to market, though they're not producing as much as we all think they are. So, some of the countries, I think it's Emirates, Kazakhstan, Saudis are doing well, but I don't think the other guys can get to what their quotas used to be. So I don't know. Maybe we get through it quicker than later.
Let's hope. Well, you've got this book that you've written, and I got to ask, how long have you been working on writing this? Is the writing process is it a year-long thing, or did you take 6 months, or did you just what was the process like for you? Hey guys, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Local Energy. Please remember to like and subscribe to us here on YouTube or Spotify, or check us out at localenergy.com. All right, back to the show.
It was years,
Okay.
I used to work as a writer I'm getting a little older now, but long time ago. And anyways, I started, it was starting up Reliance, the frac company, was just so freaking crazy. It's just so off the rails, it's a real S show, and it also timed out. I thought oil hit 147. That was in July 2008. I'm like, oh man, I got to get.
I remember.
Used to drill. Yeah, I used to drill in Texas. I used to live down in Abilene, and I got out of it because it was such a prolonged downturn. I was a young guy, just thought I gotta go through stuff. And so I got out of it for a while, but it hit 147, and I've been wanting to get back in, and I wanted to get in the service side. And I'm like, hell, I'll just leverage this company I'd started, and I'll start this frac company up. And so it was at 147, July of 2008. By 2009, there was a global financial meltdown. If you remember, just the whole bottom fell out, and I got in with a couple of frac truck builders in Oklahoma that they were just rough. So, I started going down because nothing was happening, and they kept asking for more money, and nothing happened. So I'm going down, and it's just, these guys are working on the trailers. I didn't know any better, and not that they weren't capable. They're the one brother. They're brothers. The one brother's very capable. The other brother, I don't know. He called me. He sent me an email Thanksgiving Day, 2008, saying he feared for his life with his brother. And I'm like, you guys are my builder. You're supposed to be done with these trucks in December. What do you mean you feel for your? And so I just got on the plane. It flew down, before I flew down, I called him up and said, "Hey, are you okay? What's the story?" And he's like, "Oh, we're great. We were out golfing all day. It was just a wonderful day." I go, what about your brother killing you? Well, maybe. I don't know. So I was with these people. I was not with a rational crowd. And anyways, I went down one time, and the brother had warned me. He said, "Hey, listen, the kind of nutty brother that didn't know anything about the oil business warned me in a little town that, hey, my brother, you're going to go and you confront him. There's a good chance he might pull a gun on you." And I'm like, "A gun? I mean, I'm just going to tell him he's got to get these trucks done or I need my money back." He's like, "Well, it's just, when you go in there, he might do it. He won't shoot you, but he might point it at you." And I'm like, well, hold it. And this is how desperate I was. I mean, I couldn't just fly home and say, "I'll give it to Terry." So I had to go in and see him. And I go, "Will you come with me?" He goes, "I prefer to come a little later." So I do. I go in, and then the guy did eventually show up. But I go in and saw him, and just true to form, he stood up. And he started rifling through his desk I was assuming it was his gun. This is the back of a trailer in the middle of nowhere. And I'm watching him, and he can't find it. And he's like all over his, and finally he comes out with a knife instead. So he puts the knife at me, and I'm like, "Come on, take it easy."
You think they were running like a good cop, bad cop deal on you here? You think the guy's actually just one screw loose,
I think the level of incompetence was just too high to pull that off, and I had to run across a guy. What they were doing is one guy had a deal to scrap old Schlumberger parts. And I had partners that I decided, operating partners, because, I couldn't do this on my own. I needed guys that could run it. And they insisted that they had to build this thing called a pod blender. They just had to have, and it was such outdated technology. It's like, anyways, my partners insisted on this thing. It was outdated technology. I didn't know better. So these guys were able to build them, but it turns out what they were doing was they were pulling them off of old Doyle trucks. You probably remember Doyle. And or maybe Peter, old orange trucks, old time.
The Dow trucks, is that what you said?
Yeah, Doyle. Became part of Schlumberger years ago.
Okay.
But anyways, you were doing this, and I got a hold of Schlumberger and said, "Hey, you guys okay if I could buy some parts off you?" And they're like, "What do you mean? You said I'd have this." And so it was really a tough time. I guess is where I plug the book. Buy the book, and if you're interested,
I was going to say, sounds like the writing process has been a couple of years, but the process of gathering these stories has been
I was working, taking notes as I went, because I started thinking, geez, if this company fails, maybe there's a book in it. And so I kept some notes, and then finally it was about 3 years it took of sitting down, the kids were sleeping or whatever.
That's
and
awesome.
Then the process of publishing has been going on.
You've got a couple clips. One I want to read here, but you posted it up. It was your publicist, Grace. She wrote, "Dan's work is not glamorous. It's 3 a.m. panic attacks, wondering if you can make payroll. It's partners who'd rather see you fail. It's watching your savings evaporate while your infant twins sleep, oblivious to the hell you're creating. But you keep grinding because there's no fallback and no net. That's the story no one talks about, starting a frac company in 2009. I read that, and I immediately went over to Amazon and ordered it. I read too many books, and Wade will tell you I'm a little bit maybe too passionate about oil and gas, probably more than the average. Yeah, it's a little too obsessive. But
more than the average person in oil and gas even.
Yeah, well, I'm on the dark side of oil and gas, so I still, I like to be around it. But I mean, it's even starting a company, right? So my family had a business, and they started it 40 years ago, and recently decided to get out of it and just be done. So I'm off doing my own thing now. But I mean, starting a company in just a corporate environment is one story, but then you go to the oil field and you're dealing with so many more, I think, elements, right? I mean, Mother Nature is the factor here, right? You're not just dealing with the state and all the other things. I mean, what if you had to remove one of the challenges, what would you take away? What was the hardest thing to deal with, I guess, out of all the things that you had to kind of come across? Was it the people? Was it the government? Was it the regulations? Was it, not finding oil at certain times when you really need it? What's the hardest part?
Well, lack of revenues is right up
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
and that comes with downturns, and it's kind of crazy that you have the oil industry, which is so large, it's so in everything, that you go into these periods and the bottom falls out. What other business is built to survive, a revenue stream that's based on $80 oil going to $55? I don't know of anyone else that survives that, especially, and certainly nobody that's as capital intensive. This happened to the real estate market, which is also capital intensive. No way. If rents all of a sudden went from $80 a foot to 55 without warning, I mean, sometimes you see it coming, sometimes you don't. It wouldn't be possible. But, that's always hard, and it's a lot of being away. I feel for the guys. The whole industry has gone to kind of a 2 on, 2 off. Some days, some guys are 20 days on, 10 off. So it varies by company, but you're away, you're living in trailers. You got to leave your family behind. You got to leave things that you really need to do back home behind. You have no choice. But they make a lot of money. They make a lot of money, but there's a forfeit, and it's incredibly hard. Yesterday we lost power out in the Powder River because, wind speeds were 40, 50 miles an hour, and, it's freezing cold, and you're expected to work through it. It's Christmas. You're expected to be there. If
Mm-hmm.
that's your shift, you're there. So it doesn't stop. And I think, if the green energy crowd had to live this life for a bit and see what it takes, like, it's okay. You want to protest? It's okay. Why don't you go work in it for 3 months? And
Right.
we'll talk about your protest. But
Yeah.
it's tough people, and really, you just grow to love them. You really do. You grow to, sometimes you hate them when stuff goes bad, but generally you really respect these guys, in all walks of life. You'll be on a rig floor, and there'll be Amish guys up there, or Hutterites, I think, or Saskatchewan. We got crew, very religious community people. Then you'll have a couple guys that are, American Indians, and you have Hispanics, and you might have a couple Russians. It's all walks of life, and there's inner city kids. There's kids from Southern California, people from Seattle, and probably don't tell anyone back in Seattle what they're up to, but you know what I mean? You just people from all over the world. It's really kind of great. And, the owner sits with the Roughnecks. There's no distinction. It's everybody's kind of eats off the.
Yeah. I'm looking at just the speed at which you grew like scaling something, right? And that's something that I think everyone has a challenge with. Is maybe you were the person doing the work, the hands-on work at one point, I'm sure you were, and then you had to at one point delegate or find people to bring in to be part of it with you. How did you learn to, I guess, manage or become more of a like a leader, I guess? Like, what was that transition like from doing the work to actually leading the company?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been, I see stuff, on X pop up. You follow different things, and they talk about entrepreneurs, and this person, Peter Thiel or whoever it is talking about, well, are the future entrepreneurs coming out of, some community college, or are they coming out of, one of the Ivies? You talk about other guys, successful, guy Larry Fink, talking about who they're going to hire. And they say, well, we want the hungry guys. We're not going to recruit out of Brown or Yale. We're gonna go to the state schools and pull kids out of those programs. And so I think it's a matter of, just common sense. And before the show started, the podcast, we were talking about Harold Hamm, who bootstrapped his way up from nothing. He didn't have time to go to school. And I really honestly think that some of those brilliant people I've run across don't even have college degrees. They don't. These just guys are smart. And we started drilling in the Powder a couple of years ago, 2023. We bought a large lease position, and now we're drilling it. And I had some guys running it that just weren't getting it done. They just didn't know how to do it. They couldn't get there. What happened was we had an intermediate section of the well where you're starting your curve. We were in a soft shale, and we lost the shale, caved in, kept caving in, and it was going to stick us, or or we were going to have to plug it in the well. Really not an option. And started talking to this kid, no high school, just a high school degree, but he started drilling when he was 18, and now he's 35-year-old kid, and he's drilling 31,000 foot wells in 13 days. He runs and he makes a lot of money. But all the engineers, all the kids out of mines, A&M or Wyoming, Montana Tech, they all ask him first, and he's really smart. So of course we made a deal, and that guy's name is Louis. Louis will always be there, and just really, really good. And we didn't have any schooling, but he's got a sense of how to do things.
Yeah.
So I think with entrepreneurs, it's kind of a innate thing, and I don't think it's necessarily something that can be taught. I think somewhat, but it's also an unwillingness to go to bed, until it's right, and not to say, "Oh, did you check that? Okay, good enough." No, you better go check it yourself, and just that kind of thing. Got to give your life to it.
Right. Yeah. Have you worked all over the country, or do you focus on just certain basins, or do you favor one more over the other, maybe?
Well, I live in Pennsylvania, but we don't do much work here. We do work in Appalachia, fracking wells, and we work in a middle continent, fracking wells. We have a camp in southern Illinois, which is odd because you can't even drill horizontals there, but it's an active basin. And it's actually kind of an oil-rich basin, but politics got in the way. And you can drill a horizontal, they don't want you to frack them. It's the same thing in New York State. Crying shame, but that's a different discussion. But
Don't come to California.
boy, yeah. There's an awakening, though. I see Kern County.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. Why? I mean, you're using it. Would you think you could just rid yourself of it and wave your hand? It's just so stupid. But anyways, so I guess so. We worked fracking back east and out west. We went to powder because it fit what we could do as a frac company, but there was room to grow, and it was a good state environment. You can work with the state people, and they're wonderful. They really are just great. They want it done right, absolutely, but they're on your side. They want to see you succeed, and it's really that's personal experience. We had such trouble with the well this year, and they were right there. Hey, you can get this done. You can get this done. We kept having to change things, casing program, everything else, trying to get it in the ground, and they were just great. The Wyoming people, just great. So all over again.
As far as the companies go, I mean, it sounds like you've got kind of an interesting synergy. It's a little bit unique in the sense that it sounds like you're the operating company, but you've also got the frac company as well.
Right. So
how's that work for you? I mean, I know a lot of people have tried different things like that and they failed. I mean,
yeah,
at one of the previous companies I worked for, we bought the drilling rigs, and everybody kind of said, people have tried that and it's failed, and we found a way that it worked really great for us. But how's that working out for you?
Are you allowed to ask? I'm just curious, Wade. Who was it? Are you allowed to say?
Yeah. So I worked at Citizen Energy before this.
Okay.
We had bought a couple of unit rigs, some SCR rigs that we'd been using for a couple of years, and stood up a company with those rigs, and we used those on our drilling program, and it worked out great. I mean,
well, yeah, same thing. My issue was I started looking at buying assets, right amongst areas where we were also a third party service provider, fracking other people's wells, and I don't think it was going over real well because people thought, well, you're fracking our well, you're accessing all our information. Now, next thing you're going to be a competitor. And there are, so when it was with choice that we ended up in so far away from where we work as a third party provider. But it works out great. It's the savings are truly tremendous. Our guys, if we're slow, they make a lot of money going out west. They do real well. They don't always want to go because again, you're getting, you don't know when you're coming back, because who knows what the hell's going to happen, but they do well, and now we got them staying out on frac site because they're treating it like a little too much of a vacation. So
Gotcha.
like, okay, all right,
yeah. We've dealt with those things on the drilling side too.
Yeah.
You put them up in town, or do you put them up on location? And there's pros and cons to both for sure.
Yeah. Definitely keep them out of town. That's a good idea.
When I was at Baker Hughes, they were going through that whole, they'd already divested of BJ, which was the pressure pumping side, and then they were buying BJ back. And I remember just being amazed, like whenever Baker bought BJ, I mean, BJ's revenue was through the roof, but the margins were just razor thin.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting, being able to be the operator and kind of the frac crew. I'm sure that'd be able to help out a little bit on both sides.
It does. I have to tell you, going forward, definitely would want to be an operator more than a service company, just because you just, I mean, look at these, the fastest we drilled a well last year was 24 days. This year we got it down to 14 because we're learning.
That's great.
But that's money out of the pocket of the service providers. And it keeps
Right.
going like that. And every time somebody comes up with something new, there's no, I mean, now as an operator, I appreciate it, but anytime there's something new, it gets them to work, but it doesn't get them the premium. Just like rotary steerable,
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
being able to just blow through a horizontal, and shave more days off. Everybody is, now we're going to zipper frac our next 2 wells. And it's just where you're fracking 2 at a time, and it's really tough. When you look at it, I was just looking at some drilling day rates from 2018. They're only a couple $1,000s less than what we're paying for a similar rig in 2025. But then you have all the inflation that occurred, since then, and it's like, there's no money in it anymore. There's just on the service side, it's unless oil prices go nuts and prices go nuts with it.
Yep. It's a challenge. I mean, and that's something Peter and I have talked about quite a few times is the efficiency that we're seeing across the board, whether it's drilling, whether it's completions. I mean, man, we just need so many less rigs and so many less frac crews in order to be able to produce the exact same amount of oil and gas.
Yeah, Peter probably follows it too. But the drilling, the Baker Hughes account for, it's funny. I was just kind of looking at it, and the U.S. I'm just watching oil. Oil was really great, and in fact, oil is always great priced when it's a Democrat in office. So when Obama was in office, oil was at about $100 in 2013, late 12. 12, I'm not quite. I might have been a little lower, but still really high. So 13, it was outstanding. 14, it was $100 oil constantly. I mean, $100 oil then, probably, I don't know what's inflation been. 125 now, 130.
I was going to say 115, 120, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
at least.
Consistent. Yeah, and then OPEC decided they were going to, take out U.S. shale in late 14, and then we went into a downturn because of a flooded market in 15 and 16. The rig count dropped from 2,000 down to 1,000 and never got back. And then we had the pandemic, and the rig count took another hit and never came back. And now, 23, a little bit of a bump. Now the rig count is about, I think last I saw, oil alone in the U.S., not Canada, U.S. alone is 417. And that's versus 2000 back, prior to the 15, 16 downturn. And so where is it going to end up after this downturn? We're going to drop into the 300s. Who knows from there? And I don't know. So I wouldn't want to own drilling rigs right now. It's kind of tough. It's tough.
Yeah. Where were you on April 20th, 2020 when WTI went negative?
I was taking pictures of my television screen.
Me too. I was in my bedroom. I was in my bedroom just watching that ticker. Just flabbergasted.
Yeah. I just was laughing. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
and
it makes no sense.
Oh my God. Well, storage. It just goes to show you, this is a huge business. It's a big industry, and you whipsaw from 147 to 43. I'm negative 43 or 47, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It felt like a novelty at the time, really. Whenever I saw it go negative, I mean, it didn't really strike me that this is going to take a long time to come back from.
Yeah.
I think I was just in awe looking at it, saying, what is happening? Is this real? It was
Peter,
it was hard to believe.
What year was that when it went there, or what month in?
It was 2020, April 2020. Yeah.
Right after,
time
as COVID
flies.
was shutting down and all that. It was
2020. Do by 22, I think, wasn't oil back above 100? With the Ukrainian invasion, the Russian Ukrainian. I think it jumped
popped
up
for a little bit there, but I can't remember.
Yeah. So I don't know. That gas seems to be having a run. We do natural gas fracking. We don't make a lot of gas on our wells, but back east, Appalachia is a lot of natural gas, and it doesn't seem to be really kicking off though. There was a lot of it. It was so low for so long. There was so much of it. But now, now that seems to the whole AI thing. A friend of mine's got like 1,400 wells in West Virginia. He said he just got $1.5 million check to move a pipeline because a data center's going in. So, anyways, so that data build out is really big in Virginia and West Virginia. I think because that's where the data, cable, whatever it is, transatlantic.
Right.
Got on board. Yeah. Well, the centers are going in, but for some reason there's a grid. What's that?
I was just going to say that's some of the first. Maybe I'm apparently not that informed, but that's some of the first kind of what I've heard. In terms of really moving pipelines and doing some things
Yeah,
like that in order to
yeah.
provide the energy for that. So
Well,
interesting.
that was actually for a building site that they needed the gas
Gotcha.
line out of there. And so he agreed. He made a bunch of money to do it. It's just this data build out is just extraordinary. And it's all sorts of. I just lost a guy, our field manager, really good guy, but worked 30 days straight a little bit ago because that's kind of how it goes sometimes. He wanted to be
Right.
with his kids, and someone came along, a renewable group, and said, "Hey, listen, we're going to give you all this money, and you get to stay home, on a week on, week off deal." And their deal is they're building pads for gensets to charge up at low energy and then discharge at high energy prices. So just following the daily high price at night or a day and then low price at night. It's all based on demand
Arbitrage.
and pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah, arbitrage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's like it's kind of a gimmick, I mean, okay, but a lot of the renewables, and I'm in favor of some of them. I think if the wind blows a lot, okay, or if the sun shines a lot, but this one size fits all that gets it's just and there's just a lot of kind of a lot of graft that comes along with it too. So I don't know,
Yep.
So we'll
Gotcha.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're looking at the next kind of generation of people coming through, right? You got the 18-year-olds, the 19-year-olds, the 20-year-olds. If there was something that you were going to share with them, we have a large amount of our audience is younger, just kind of like looking up for mentorship and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
one or two things that you might share with them as they're kind of beginning their careers.
Yeah, I could talk about that. I mentioned a friend of mine who rose up to become a kind of a company man, they call him. That's somebody who works for the person that owns the wells, the operator, and then runs all the crews. And these guys are making, $2,000 a day. It's a 12-hour shift, $2,000 for 12 hours, and they're really super competent people. They're all like, and they don't all have calls. Some are engineers, some aren't. But $2,000 a day for 14 days at a time. Then they go home and come back and they make, another $28,000 and then come back. So they're making, roughly $28,000 a month is a way to look at it. Then sometimes more. So if you want to make north of 300 a year and you're mechanically minded and you're organized, that would be a really good thing to think about. I have two daughters that are juniors in high school, and they're looking at becoming petroleum engineers. And so we're running around looking at the different programs, the Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and so ours would be a family business, but if oil is at 105,000, excuse me, 105 million barrels a day of production right now, and we need to get to OPEC saying 123. The International Energy Administration out of France says less, but they're typically wrong. And they're also IEA, as they're known, but they favor renewables, as does most of Europe still, even after the craziness with Ukraine and Russia and failing renewable programs, especially in Germany. I see Spain's blowing up all its nuclear reactors, which is absolutely it's stunning.
It's crazy.
How to create poverty.
It's all part of
yeah. How to create poverty, and I mean, you want all energy. Just as an aside, and then I'll get right back to it. All energy pollutes. Oil and gas pollutes, releases CO2, no doubt about it. It does, and we don't have to debate that. It also releases methane, but you do everything on God's green earth to trap your methane and sell it because it's natural gas. So we have all sorts of instrumentation and procedures, consultants, state visits, all sorts of stuff to make sure methane's being. So, but we do produce oil, and when you refine it and you burn it, it turns into CO2. Some of it gets released, but a lot of climate science is now saying it's methane that's really the worst, more so than CO2. But if you look at biogenic decay, which is methane, any forest rot, anything, any swamp, anything, seabed is releasing methane into the atmosphere. So it's kind of, but what nobody talks about or wants to talk about is the fact that renewables are also toxic. You replace Daniel Jurgen, the great writer who wrote really a couple just phenomenal books on the oil industry. The New Map was one of the newer ones. I forget his first one, The Prize.
The Prize.
Yeah. And, he coined it. He said, well, you've got big oil and you've got big shovel. Renewables are big shovel. and you're strip mining for lithium. You're deep mining for uranium and cobalt and all the rare earths that you need. And you're over in Africa. You're extracting over there where there's no human rights. It's pretty bad. But just destroying the surface of the earth. You're putting up these solar farms. I've got a guy that I worked with that lives in Texas across the street from a 1,500-acre solar farm. He said it's a death zone because it radiates so much heat. There is no wildlife that can exist in these, and it's all blocked off. You put a couple of wells there, and cows are eating right up against the side of the well if you're not cutting your weeds. It's just the way it is. And then the dirtiest secret is when you go to these active systems. Passive is just solar. You harness the energy as the sun shines, or wind, you harness wind as the wind blows. But otherwise, there's no energy to be created unless you have batteries. Batteries require, the manufacturing of batteries is one of the most toxic things you can do on Earth. And industrial processes, you have to smelt those minerals. And smelting means acid rain, it means deforestation. In Canada, they dealt with it by building these things called the super stacks. Instead of deforesting all the land around Sudbury, Canada, around the mineral shield up there, they just blow it into the stratosphere instead. So Toronto gets a taste of it rather than just Sudbury. And it's kind of a sham to pretend that this is not harmful. But yes, going back to opportunities for young kids, I don't know about renewables. If I was a young kid 5 years ago, I'd say, yeah, maybe you ought to look at this because a lot of government money going into this and all that, and there's companies going into it. But there's been a real pushback. And it's not just because we have a new president that doesn't favor it as much as he favors oil and gas. It's because it's not working. It's not working. In the Northeast, their electricity, their power costs are so high. And so you've got sort of a blue state, red state mentality. Unfortunately, energy is not bifurcated into favor this, heat that. And it's just nuts. But it's now it's going to be curtailed. The truth is wind and solar cannot stand on their own. They have to be subsidized, meaning you have to pay more taxes to produce this energy, which is polluting. It's not just flowers and sunshine. I mean, it's acid rain and deforestation and mining.
Right.
Nobody wants to tell the truth. It's just, I don't know. It just feels like we live in a world where it's so agenda driven and everybody's gaslighting everybody. I just don't believe anything anymore. Nothing.
Yeah.
So
it gets tough for sure. One more question I'd love to ask, if it's okay. All right. Is there something in oil and gas specifically, so in oil and gas, that maybe we're not talking about that we should be talking about?
Well, oil and gas production has brine water associated with it almost always. And brine water is no good. It's deep earth water that's salinity contents are different. Some of it, some of the states allow you to release it on the ground. Most wouldn't, and be based on pretty regulated. But when we went out to Wyoming, we decided that we were not going to run our brine to disposal plants. We were going to keep it. We're going to reuse it for frac jobs. So we pull it out of the ground. We built storage areas. We bought storage areas, enormous tanks, and then monitored frac storage ponds, which are very tightly monitored. Nobody wants to put water on the ground. In fact, it's really people are really good at self-policing. I'm not going to say all operators are, but I've never seen somebody say, "Yeah, just leave it, dump it there." Nobody does that.
Yeah.
That I know of. And maybe 30 years ago, but not now. And so we use 100% of our brine water. So I think that that's one of the dirty things about oil and gas is brine water production. But if you're putting it back in the ground, which we've gotten a lot better at doing, you're minimizing it. Yes, something could rupture. There could be a leak of some sort. But typically these are leaks that occur in areas where there's already oil and gas. You could taint the groundwater supply. That could happen if something happened. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to do that. I'm sure we can invent some scenarios where it would happen, but it's certainly not. You protect those groundwater areas, and that's first and foremost. But I just don't hear much about polluting them.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's all I can think of. But there's more. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah. I'm sure of
deal.
it. I could talk to you for another hour, Dan, and I love your stories. This is great. Well, we're gonna cut it off here. We're running up against the clock, and we'll have all of Dan's links in the show notes. So go pre-order his book. If you're listening to this a couple months after it comes out, go get his book, check it out. And Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully, we'll see you soon.
I appreciate it, Peter and Wade. You guys are doing a great thing. It's very
Thank you.
informative.
All right. See y'all
Thanks.
next week.
Okay.